Super Bowl 60 is a wrap, but neither of the teams competing even made the playoffs last year. And that means your Indianapolis Colts can learn some lessons from the Seahawks and Patriots. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Welcome to Locked On Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network out there. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. What is up, everybody? I am Jake Arthur, the Indianapolis Colts beat writer for Roundtable Sports. And we are talking about the Super Bowl today. Obviously, that's what the whole NFL world is talking about. Now, as an Indianapolis Colts-based show, we have no business talking playoffs, let alone the Super Bowl. But as always, we're going to try and find a way to tie this back to us, because who's better than number one, right? But no, so the Seahawks beat down the hated Patriots. I don't know how you guys still feel about the Patriots. Tom Brady and pretty much everybody involved is gone. But if the Patriots are in the Super Bowl, you don't want to see them win. And now, as a result, they have the most Super Bowl losses in NFL history. So that's always good. But the Seahawks beat them down 29-13, and it really wasn't even that close. A couple kind of garbage time scores by the Patriots after it felt like the game was already pretty well decided. But we look at both of these teams, and from the preseason, no one would have really thought that the Seahawks or Patriots, either team really, was going to be able to make a primed run to the Super Bowl. Now, the Seahawks were 10-7 the year before in the first year under Mike Macdonald, so they were a decent team, but they missed the playoffs. But, you know, they go out with Geno Smith, they bring in Sam Darnold, and suddenly they go from 10-7 to 14-3. The Patriots were the real story, though. They had drafted Drake May the year before, I believe with the third overall pick. They were a lowly team, 4-13. They got all the way to 14-3. So they're one of the bigger ways we can learn some lessons here from this Colts team. That, of course, 8-9, they missed the playoffs 5 straight years. They have the epic collapse down the stretch, going from 8-2 to losing 7 in a row and missing the playoffs, of course, again. So we're going to look at what these teams have done in common to really get them into the Super Bowl and get them on top of the NFL landscape. And it's for the most part things they have in common that they both have done that it's really not out of the question for the Colts to be able to do. So when you look at offense, a lot of homegrown talent on both sides of the ball offensively, especially with Seattle. So you look at Kenneth Walker, who had about 100 yards in the first half last night, was your Super Bowl MVP. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was the offensive player of the year. And just about their entire offensive line essentially is homegrown. They drafted everybody as well. You just draft offensively, let those guys work. Now, for the Colts, they've already done that. They've kind of checked that big box so far, and they mirror the Seahawks in a lot of ways there. You know, the offensive line, they've drafted and developed Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren. The whole group is essentially drafted by the Colts except for the quarterback. So the Colts have already done really well there. When you look at the Patriots, they drafted Drake May, Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson, Kayshon Boutte, Jared Campbell, Campbell, the left tackle, Jared Wilson, the left guard. Not a great night for either of those players, but you know they were solid players leading up through the season. They just kind of ran into, you know, they were very much overmatched last night. But Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, not bad draft picks, regardless there. It's two teams that have their quarterback. Despite having good defenses, this was not a Trent Dilfer or Brad Johnson situation. You look at Seattle, they went out and they got Sam Darnold, who followed up last year's breakout campaign with yet another one. So we now think Sam Darnold is probably pretty legit. 2 really solid years in a row. Just got his offensive coordinator head coaching job with the Las Vegas Raiders, Clint Kubiak. And then Drake May was a point away from a share of the MVP award. So Drake May, a fantastic second year in the NFL. So no question about quarterback here with either team. Offensively, again, both teams were top 10 in yards, points, passing, and rushing. So the Colts, for most of the year, they had that argument as well. They were on a historic pace for scoring. Their points per drive was like number one and one of only a few teams of this millennium, essentially, that had marks as high as they did. They had the top offense. They were running the hell out of the ball with Jonathan Taylor. He was an MVP candidate. The quarterback Daniel Jones was top 5 in passing yards pretty much all year. So the Colts checked a lot of these boxes early on before the collapse. Now, what I did find interesting with both of these offenses, though, they were not in the top 10 in rushing yards per carry or in red zone scoring. So that told me kind of a couple things there. They also weren't elite on third down, and they were on the lower end of fourth down attempts as well. So all those things together, it kind of told me that while they're top 10 in rushing the ball, but not top 10 in yards per carry, it meant that they ran the ball when they wanted to. You know what I mean? It's not like they had some big potent rushing attack like the Ravens or anything, or like the Colts earlier in the year, but they ran the ball when they needed to, crucial downs, short yardage, nursing a lead, things like that. And Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard have both said they really would like to be able to establish the run and run the ball when they need to run it, not just throughout the game, blah, blah, blah. But the Colts did do a great job of that in the second halves of games in the first half of the season. They threw a lot in the first half, but then they battered defenses with Jonathan Taylor in the second half. So that is something, at least we've seen the Colts do that. And then when you bring in not elite success in the red zone for these teams, again, not elite on third down either, and they didn't go for it a ton on fourth downs. Actually, I think Seattle was dead last in fourth down attempts. To me, it means they take the points. And basically, when you get down high red zone, decently into opponent's territory, you're going to go for field goals and you're going to take those 3 points rather than chancing it with fourth down attempts. I'm a little mixed on this one because I do like how aggressive Shane Steichen is on fourth down. I don't think he makes a ton of awful decisions on fourth downs. But there are times where we look at it and we're like, Shane, man, you probably could have taken the field goal, take the points there. And it looks like these teams generally played it safe. Mike McDonald with the Seahawks and, of course, can't think of his Mike Vrabel with the Patriots. Those are coaches who are maybe a little more conservative, who are going to take the points. Now, I don't want Shane Steichen to lose his edge and lose his aggressiveness. But, maybe here and there, take the points instead of going for the jugular. If it's 4th and 4 or something, you know what I mean? Maybe then kick the field goal. But yeah, that's something that the Colts are going to have to do some self-evaluation over the offseason, and perhaps that's one thing that they turn up. But that is it for the offense and some of the kind of commonalities between New England and Seattle that the Colts can learn from. Again, the good news is the Colts already did a lot of those things early in the season, and I think that's pretty encouraging. Injuries are going to be one thing that kind of derail the whole train car, but it is what it is. I think it's good that the DNA is there for the Colts. They know how to do it if they can just stay healthy and kind of stay out of their own way. But coming up next, we're going to look at the defensive side of the ball, and especially one defense in Seattle that is one of the better defenses that we have seen in quite some time. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events that you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes more sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense super fast, speed skating races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked in on the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than when FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, welcome back, everybody, and thank you again for making Locked On Colts your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Clubs. You can check out our audio ad-free and get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of our shows. Go to LockedOnColts.supercast.com to join or even gift a subscription today. All right, so let's talk about defense now. So on the offensive side of the ball, we pointed out that both teams had a decent amount of homegrown talent through the draft there. But on defense, that's still the case there. But you can really notice that these teams have bought some instant impact, high impact defensive playmakers here. So New England went out and got last year's Super Bowl star from the Eagles, Milton Williams, defensive tackle. They got Williams, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Kayvon Chason. You look at each of those guys and you're like, yeah, I could see how they had a hand in the Patriots getting through the season and getting to the Super Bowl. Now, of course, Landry unfortunately had a late injury that kind of threw things off for him. But New England had a boatload of money last year, and they went out and they spent it. And they spent it well, and they got high-impact players that really hit. I don't look at what they did and see a whole lot of misses here. They got heavy contribution across the board. Seattle didn't do a ton with buying necessarily, at least not this year, but you look like DeMarcus Lawrence was a big one. Sam Darnold, obviously that was expensive, but that was on the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, I look at this and I'm like, you can buy a defense quickly. What the Colts obviously need to do. I think on everybody's wish list this year, even though they have not a ton of cap space right now to work with, like depending on where you look, it's around $35 million. But we've talked ad nauseum about contracts they need to kind of revisit to create more space, whether that's Pittman, extending Quentin Nelson, doing something with DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, Grover Stewart. Like they've got contracts out there to look at and kind of create more space from. So it's easier said than done to just say spend a ton of money and get that, especially when you have Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce on the offensive side of the ball that's going to eat up a ton of that money. The Colts need to create more cap space so that they can go out and spend handsome money on defensive playmakers. They did a great job of that last year. Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, those were big impact players, but Ward obviously had his issues staying healthy. Cam Bynum responded with having kind of a career year, career high 4 interceptions, did a lot of really good things. That one was definitely money well spent. But you look at the defensive line, edge, interior, whatever you want to do, spend a bunch. Linebacker, I would maybe lean more towards drafting, but if you wanted to spend money on one linebacker, maybe not two, but one, go ahead and do it. You need impact players. So you look at the defensive side of the ball for both of these teams, just like with the offense, they were top 10 in yards, points, passing, and rushing. Seattle was also 6th in takeaways and 7th in sacks. Obviously, you look at last night with that pass rush, they were really, really good. And then they were 1st against the run in yards per carry. So I look at these things and I say D-line, D-line, D-line. You can tie all of those factors straight to the defensive line. Obviously, sacks, yes. Yards per carry, yes. But when you've invested so much draft capital and like the trade market and free agency on the defensive line, it's all going to come together to complement each other well against the run and against the pass. And then rushing quarterbacks leads to errant throws, and then you get takeaways. Look at what happened with Drake May last night. Made some mistakes when he was under duress. So for the Colts, again, like I said, interior, edge, linebacker, secondary, all over the place. There's not a spot on the defense that would be wasted money, I wouldn't think. So let's look at the edge room right now. You have Laiatu Latu and JT Tuimoloau are really the only noteworthy edge defenders you have under contract for next year. Samson Ebukam is a free agent, and you should probably go ahead and let him walk. Tyquan Lewis, same thing. Even if you bring him back, he can't be like your third rusher. He's not that explosive anymore. He's a little older. You just, like Chris Ballard said, you have to get younger, you have to get faster, you have to get more explosive. And re-signing 30-plus-year-old guys with injury histories is just not the way to do it. So you have to do that with Laiatu Latu and Tuamaloau being your only guys. And then we've talked about DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart both being 32 years old to start this year. DeForest Buckner, we've heard he wants to play, but is coming off of a neck injury that landed him on IR twice last year. So even if you think those guys are going to be healthy and awesome next year, it would be very, very wise to have the foresight to invest early in defensive tackle depth in the draft. I would have been fine with them doing it early last year, to be completely honest with you. If like Walter Nolan would have fallen in their lap, Kenneth Grant, you'll get the year before with like the kid from Texas that went to Seattle, Byron Young, maybe? No, but you guys know what I'm talking about. But yeah, just invest, especially in the interior, because it takes a year or so for those guys to get good, and especially edge rushers. I mean, they say it takes 2 or 3 years for those guys to get really, really good. Well, the Colts miss on a lot of edge rushers. So number one, you have to spend money there because you need to go get guys are at least decent. I think in free agency this year, this is a good group of edge rushers that still have some upside. You've seen a lot of guys who have had to be in rotations with other veterans, and they just haven't got a ton of playing time, but like in a vacuum and their smaller sample size of playing time, they've done really well. And it looks like they're ascending players. I feel like Chris Ballard usually does decent with those type of players. So good year for that. But yeah, that's the draft we're talking about, but you still have to go buy players that you feel really good about. Number one, the tape they've already put out there in the NFL, but then still becoming ascending players. Milton Williams is a great example of that from the Patriots. Was a star in the Super Bowl for the Eagles last year, and then went and then was a stud on Sunday against the Seahawks as well. So far, lessons we've learned. Obviously, you have to have a quarterback, but make sure you draft well on offense, and then you spend your money big time on defense, because I feel like defense is like the earlier instant impact players. Call me crazy. Maybe it's splitting hairs and there's really no difference there. But I feel like you can buy a defense a lot more successfully than you could buy an offense. So coming up, we're going to look at kind of like some wild cards, some X factors, maybe things you can't even predict. But, if the Colts can pull these things off, they might be in a pretty good spot. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper, but maybe wasn't the right fit, then you know how important it is to get that right. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your posts to the people who are the best matches for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement that it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. All right, welcome back, everydayers. We are reflecting on the Super Bowl and being jealous about what we just saw the Seahawks put out there. Because I'm not going to lie, with how the Colts looked early in the season, this looked like a good year for them to not only make the playoffs, but make some noise in the playoffs and potentially reach the Super Bowl. This just was obviously a down year for the AFC. The Patriots, who went from essentially flipped their record from the year before, their win-loss record, quickly vaulted to the top seed. You didn't have the Ravens, you didn't have the Bengals, you didn't have the Chiefs. The Bills weren't all that elite this year. So this, unfortunately, is a very disappointing year for the Colts to have missed the playoffs. And so we're kind of looking at Seattle and New England and looking at some commonalities, like what did these teams really succeed at that the Colts might be able to adopt. So this next one here, we've talked about the draft on offense. We've talked about spending definitely on defense. But I just look at these and I look at some of the most important players on both teams. And I say, you got to go aggressively pursue X factors. Go look for guys you think are difference makers. And I mean, don't let there be a price tag on it. Go get them. Whether it's free agency, the money you're going to spend, whether you're going to trade for guys, like just go do it. Like this game had its handprints all over it from guys who were just aggressively pursued by both sides. So Sam Darnold, obviously, Stephon Diggs, Garrett Bradbury, Milton Williams, who I've mentioned a million times already, Carlton Davis, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, who I've been crazy about on this playoff stretch, really the second half of the year since Seattle traded for him. DeMarcus Lawrence, Leonard Williams a couple years ago with Seattle. Ernest Jones has been on like 19 different transactions over the last few years, but settled back in Seattle and has been a stud for them. So aggressively pursue players you think are going to be difference makers. And I do feel a little encouraged about that when it comes to the Colts, because it definitely felt like they were intentional about that last offseason. They identified Mooney Ward and Cam Bynum as difference makers. They had belief in Daniel Jones, and they made it happen. So they actually had conviction about some of these guys, and they did make it happen. In the past, they've been criticized for not going aggressively after high-priced players, which they've entered the chat with some of those guys, but they haven't been able to close deals because they were just essentially pinching pennies and protecting dollars and not putting enough liquid money up front, essentially, which always kind of put them behind in the bidding war. But, they put up guaranteed money, and it made a difference last year. So I'm a little more confident that they will do that. They don't have a ton of money right now. Again, we've mentioned probably in the ballpark of about $35 million in cap space. Now the cap is going to go up anywhere from like 22 to 26 million. So that's definitely a big factor for the Colts as well. But then I think it still would be wise to go create additional cap space by revisiting some of the contracts that are maybe a little outdated at this point. So we know at edge, interior defense, linebacker, you can have impact players at linebacker if you just make it happen. They don't have to be afterthoughts. Like, they can be difference makers. I think the Colts just need to realize that. And I think they kind of got a little bit of a sour pill of that last year by realizing that maybe they don't need elite linebackers, but having bad linebackers will get you beat because that is exactly what happened last year. But no, on the offensive line, I think they're fine, especially you look at like Bort and Gonzalez, another year developing for those guys. Right tackle is a little tricky. Do you bring back Braden Smith? If not, how much competition do you bring in for Jalen Travis? That one will be interesting. At receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., if you trade him or release him, which I don't think they would release him, but if you trade him, that assumes that you're going to have the money then to bring back Alec Pierce. So that still means you have Alec Pierce, but no Michael Pittman Jr. Pittman's not bad. You don't want to pay him $29 million. So now you have to find a way to replace Michael Pittman Jr. So that one might be best to go through the draft to do it, maybe even early, because if you're going to free agency for receivers, as we'll see with Alec Pierce, that's a very, very expensive enterprise. So maybe corner is another one. if you don't want to count on Charvarius Ward and Justin Wally both hitting it out of the park in this year. So, aggressively pursue guys that you have conviction about, because I do feel like when Chris Ballard and the Colts have conviction about certain players and they do swing big, a lot of times it works. Like, look at Sauce Gardner so far. When he's been on the field, it's been fine. I think he's rebounded a little bit from his Jets days. He has been hurt, which we're going to get to in a minute. But, like, that's a player who has a high cachet around the league as, like, an elite cornerback. When they take a big swing, it's usually for a significant player. So I would like to think they're going to do that at least once this year, not just from a player internally, get someone from the outside who's going to make a big difference. And then the other thing that we can't predict, other than if you want to predict that it doesn't happen for the Colts, is just having really good luck with your health, which both the Seahawks and Patriots were able to do. Not the case for the Colts last year at all. Here's a list of players who missed a notable amount of time, I would say. Daniel Jones, obviously, Anthony Richardson. You can make an argument that maybe the Colts win a game, an extra game, if Anthony Richardson is out there to be able to relieve Daniel Jones after he gets hurt. You can make an argument for that. Braden Smith obviously missed the final month of the season. DeForest Buckner on IR with the neck injury twice. Jalen Carlisle really was never right at any point in the year. Was hampered for several months by the ankle injury that he had. Sauce Gardner, a calf injury, derailed most of his time with the Colts. Mooney Ward, 3 concussions this year, got on IR twice. Kenny Moore missed a few games with that Achilles injury. Justin Wally tore his ACL over the summer. Hunter Wooler suffered a Liz Frank injury in his foot over the summer. Jalen Jones spent a ton of time off the field with hamstring injuries. And then kicker Spencer Schrader, the week after winning AFC Offensive Player or AFC Special Teams Player of the Month for the first month of the year, gets his knee blown out by getting hit on a field goal block attempt. So the Colts had awful luck with injuries. If the tides just turn for them a little bit, though, maybe not to fully reflect what Seattle and New England had going on, but just not the disaster that was last year, then I think things can break their way a little bit. So hopefully you came away a little encouraged that things could go well for the Colts, because a lot of these things that we've seen New England and Seattle succeed at this year, we saw the Colts have extended success with it in the first half of the season, to the point where it didn't just look like a mirage. And, they hit a tougher part of their schedule and they dealt with some injuries that I think kind of took the wind out of their sails a bit. But I feel decent about what the Colts could look like next year if they just make some of the appropriate moves in the offseason. So hopefully you guys too do too, but drop a comment in here. Just let me know what you think. Do you have hope for this next season or not? I know a lot of people are obviously in the dumps about Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen being back, but overall, give us a vibe check there in the comments. And again, thank you guys for tuning in today to Locked On Colts. We'll be back tomorrow for both the Daily Show again and the Locked On Colts Squad Show, bringing in Derek Schultz and Alan Pinkett, along with Zach Hicks and myself. Make sure you guys subscribe to our show so you get all of the latest episodes. If you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on social media. If you never miss an episode, then remember the Everydayer Club is built just for you. Get Locked On Colts audio ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Just go head over to lockedoncolts.supercast.com to join the club, or follow the link in our show notes. Do it now as we are closing this thing out. And with that, you guys have a great night.